Hey, welcome back to another interview segment for Reunion Roadmap. This is Al McCarn. I am very pleased today to talk with my good friend and partner in many intercessory circles, Bev Hall, Bev from North Carolina, as as we refer to you sometimes. Bev, welcome back to Reunion Roadmap.
Thank you.
Yeah, previously when you and I had talked, it was in the context of the nation's Ninth of Av, and I believe you were there in 2019 with the first group that went, feet on the ground in Israel to join with our Jewish family, our Jewish brothers and sisters in mourning and fasting and praying over the Ninth of Av, the fast of the fifth month. Well, we've been involved together in that venture and many other things since. But today, well, you've got a special thing on your heart that you want to share with the audience. So let me just ask you to introduce the topic.
So, what I'd like to talk about today is how I got involved with the synagogues, the local synagogues, and also the church. It's been a long process. In 2009, my husband and I didn't feel comfortable in the Christian church anymore. So we made this decision to go to a Messianic congregation. He was much more into it than I was. I couldn't understand this legalism and all these 613 laws. But fortunately, I was with a good congregation, and they did a lot of the traditional songs in Hebrew, the parading of the Torah. I learned some of the protocol. Like, for example, you don't touch the Torah scrolls. I made that mistake once in the synagogue. I'll never make it again. But there's things that we need to know: when to stand, when to sing. Kind of reminds me of my Episcopal church background. So we went to a couple different congregations and had a different perspective from each one about how do you live out this life, the Torah life. What do? We knew the basics. Shabbat, we got that one. But I couldn't even keep 7 feasts straight. It took me a long time to be able to understand the difference between Sukkot and Shavuot. I finally decided there's an H in Shavuot, so that comes before Sukkot with you. So that's how little I knew, but it's been a growing experience. And my husband and I were involved with a congregation in South Carolina. And we had just finished Sukkot. This was 3 Sukkots ago. That would have been 2020. And we celebrated Shemini Atzeret. So I knew, okay, the 8th day is important. Don't pack up on the 8th day. And then the day after, I went home first because I took my granddaughter to the airport, and I talked to him on the phone. Well, he never came home. He passed away right there at the campground. And that threw my life into a big tiz. I mean, everything was upside down. And after he was buried, I had a house fire, so I had to move out of the house. It was COVID. I couldn't work anymore because I work in the schools. I'm a retired school teacher. So I did substitute teaching. My friends are all older. We're in our 70s, and they went into quarantine. I actually lost one of my friends to COVID, but other friends were also passing away. So I'm realizing, I'm now in the generation my mom was in when her husband passed away. And now the friend group, they're passing away. And there's a constant change. So I kind of lost my mind, which I found afterwards is very common with a widow or widower. They just don't know what to do. They've lost half of themselves. So I moved to South Carolina. Because of the fire, I got rid of 3/4 of our possessions, and I rented a little apartment down there and was going to the Messianic congregation. But then I found myself very isolated there too, because everyone is so spread out. It's not like you have a community close by. You can go out to lunch. And again, I couldn't volunteer. I'm retired. I had lots and lots of hours on my hand. And I really went downhill after that. I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep. And then one of our best friends at that congregation passed away. And that was like the tipping point. I could not take one more bit of grief. So I moved back into the Charlotte area and I moved in with my daughter. Okay, so I'm sleeping on the couch at her house and she's got a busy life and my son-in-law have a busy life and they were very understanding. But like, what am I going to do with my life now? I'm in a strange town. My friends that I had left were about 45 minutes away, so I couldn't just run to their house. So I missed children. I missed them terribly because I've always been with children. So I decided to go to church with my daughter and start volunteering in their children's church. And they just put me right into teaching. It's a very nice church. They're very open to people. And they're like, sure, just, pass the test. They do a background test and you can start teaching. And from there, I developed a girls' club, 4th and 5th grade. So I meet with them twice a month. So that was the beginning. And of course, you and I go to the same congregation. And I went cold turkey down there, knowing that you thought it was a wonderful place. And again, I say, can I work with the children? And after they kind of watched me for a couple months, because they're very cautious, they don't want just anybody teaching. They let me start teaching. Well, I needed more than that. So I started going to Celebrate Recovery because I'm working with codependency. So I didn't want to lean too heavily on my daughter and son-in-law and make them my entire life. And that was a great experience because I found people that were also working on hurts, habits, and hangups. So going to that group for a while, they finally said, just recently, why don't you become the women's leader in the women's group? And then I started working with a ministry nearby, working with Hispanic children. And that's a Christian mission. Well, they put me on their board. And now I'm going to be moving into a reading coach volunteer position. So all these doors opened up. And now I'm suddenly immersed in the Christian community.
So this gets to the interesting topic that we want to cover here, because I know you have so many years of interaction with the Jewish communities, Messianic and non-Messianic. I know you mentioned 2 congregations in South Carolina, Gates to Zion and then Founded in Truth, both of them great congregations. But it seems that the Father is leading you back to the church. And having heard your personal story, Bev, and understanding the personal circumstances you have with both your needs and the qualifications and gifts that you have to contribute, I get that. But why do you suppose it is that you're being led back into the Sunday church, having been awakened to the importance of Torah and keeping Shabbat?
Yeah, that's been a problem because in my travels and learning about this Hebrew roots walk, I felt very convicted that I shouldn't be involved with Christmas, Easter, go to church on Sunday. That was all bad. You don't want to mix in. You need to be separate. Well, I heard a really good talk one time. I wish I know who gave it, but this Messianic pastor was talking about when you become a widow or a widower, if you lose somebody in your family, someone close, you are going to need your biological family because of this very fact the Messianic congregations are very far flung. Gates Design, you mentioned, is a couple hours away. Founded in Truth is 45 minutes away. So what am I going to do? Well, I wanted to be a part of my family. I've spent many Christmases away from them. In fact, right after Roger died, I spent that Christmas sitting in a parking lot in a park by myself because I wasn't going to be involved in all that. But now I'm in desperate need of human interaction when you don't have that spouse with you eating and talking and going places. I'm just a people person. So now I've got this question. I need my daughter. Am I going to hold her off and say, I'm not going to church with you. I'm not going to have Christmas dinner with you. Easter is off limits. Even though the whole family is together, I'm going to sit in my own little apartment and do my own thing. Well, that just didn't sit right. It didn't feel right. And I think through the years, through listening to Reunion Roadmap, and especially Barry Phillips, talking about we need pastors, we need people who will understand other people's lives and minister to them. We need family. And maybe they're not believing like we are, but I need to interact with them. So I crossed that line. And a lot of people were surprised. They still are. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what she's doing right now. But it's been a couple of years and it's very consistent.
Okay, I have some thoughts about this from my own journey, because I remember back in 2014, after being in this Torah Hebrew roots walk for a decade, and we went through our own separation and throw out everything that's questionable, whether it's really pagan or not, and don't do any of the Christmas and Easter stuff. But I got to thinking, what are we missing here? Because the Torah keeping fellowships and congregations in this Hebrew roots walk, we don't have hospitals like the Baptists and Methodists do. We don't have orphanages like the Catholics do. We don't have other ministries and food kitchens and foster care ministries like you and I are involved with in South Carolina. So maybe we've missed something, and maybe we need to go back and reconnect with the traditional church to pick up those pieces we've missed. Does that resonate with what you've been through in the last 3 or 4 years?
It really does. Like, yeah, there's not many places to serve when you're so far away from your congregation. If you're going to do something like a food bank, you got to go to the church. Pregnancy care center, you've got to go to the church. They're the ones supporting it.
So then why is it that so many of us have experienced this hard separation when we're first coming into this walk and we're questioning everything we've been taught? Why is it that we've done this, even to the point of keeping family at a distance on Christmas and Easter? Why did that have to happen, or did it?
Well, I like what Tony Robinson, the Hebraic heritage, what he says is that we are going to go through stages. When we come into this walk, first of all, we're going to have shock and awe. Then we're going to be angry. And then we've got to process all of that before we can really move out and live this in a mature way. So I don't want to put myself down or anybody else for separating and wanting to come completely out, because we have to know, what is our identity? Who am I? And then when we find out we're Israel, that's one thing I learned at Gates Design that made me so excited. You mean I'm Israel? Wow. So what does that mean? Oh, yeah. I wear long dresses and we dance and wave flags. That's really cool. I love all of that.
Yes. And let me tell you, folks, if you have not seen our Founded in Truth Shabbat services, often you will see the children in our congregation going around with flags during the worship time. Bev Hall has been instrumental in making that happen.
Yep, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it
But
is.
I think sincerely, we want to do it right. When we understand where Easter and Christmas come from, we don't want to be a part of that. And I understand that. And I still have my boundaries. Like when they're doing cookies, my daughter gets out the Hanukkah cookie cutters in respect of me. In fact, her father is Jewish, so she has some roots there, and she's done Passover since she was a baby. So she has some understanding. And she also is another bridge into the Christian community, because every year she has Passover. And, she tells her friends about it and tries to get new people in on it that don't know.
Yeah, we're in an interesting place now, because this movement, the Torah awakening among Christians, as I like to call it, we're now in the third generation. You mentioned your daughter, who, well, grew up understanding Passover thanks to having a Jewish father. My kids, we made the shift out of the Sunday church to Messianic Jewish fellowship when they were in middle school. So they were just getting socialized to the norm when the rules changed for them.
Mm.
And then, our pastor, Matthew Vanderels, he was growing up when the shift happened with his parents. So now we have to figure out again, we've got our identity, and knowing that we're part of the Commonwealth of Israel, that's a huge part of it. But we're in this in-between place still, between church and synagogue. I could ask why. In fact, I'll ask your opinion. Bev, why do you think the Lord did that? What is he doing with this strange group of people who are not quite Christian and not quite Jewish, but a little bit of both?
I think I have an answer for that. I've heard various pastors and leaders say the church has to wake up. They have to learn, true Torah and start understanding Brother Yehuda, and we're grafted into him, and we should be respecting him. But how are they going to do it if nobody teaches them? And if we're separate from the church, nobody's going to know. Now, I do not go around preaching at the church to people, but I always throw a little something in. Like, I do Shabbat on Saturday. I'm not going to be able to do that. You do what? Yeah, I worship on the Shabbat. And recently we were thinking about having a group. I go to a Baptist church and a Presbyterian church. I went to another one, but that got to be too much. I figured two or three is enough. But we were talking about starting a group. And in fact, it was Grief Share. Now that's another Christian ministry that is absolutely fabulous. And I got to tell you, it really saved my life as far as being able to reconstruct my life. It's a series of 13 weeks of videos. So I said to the other church, hey, we ought to have that. And the woman said, okay, well, we need to go to the council to talk. And she goes, but I think you're going to have to become a member. And I said, oh, I don't think I can. I said, I'm a Sabbath keeper. And she just looked at me. And when she got back to me, she goes, I don't think we're going to have that ministry here. So there's some boundaries I feel like I can cross. Actually, with that Southern Baptist preacher, he's very, very good, wonderful teacher. I learned so much from him. And I think just like we talk about in the synagogue, if they're teaching, you can learn so much, but the same with the church. So the pastor said something about those who worship on the Shabbat and, being legalistic. So I thought, okay, I got to figure this out. So I wrote him an email and I said something like, so if I worship on the Sabbath, does that mean there's something wrong. Do you think I'm doing something wrong? And he got back with me and he said, not unless you're saying that's how you get saved. So there's some communication that has to take place. Just like in the synagogue, you don't want to go in there and sit in there with anybody thinking you're a Jew when you're not. And I've heard this through teaching too. If it's possible, talk to the rabbi. Tell him who you are. Tell him you're not there to change anybody, but you're there to learn. And my husband and I, when he was alive, we've taken both of our grandchildren to Israel. I was going to take the third one this summer, but it's not going to work out. But we went first with a Messianic group. Next, we went with the Kol Tikva synagogue down here in Davidson, and it was fascinating. We got to see things that I don't think I'd ever see on a Christian tour. In fact, you and I went to a museum this summer. It was the Rabin Center, right? And
yes, we did.
I wouldn't have been able to tell you about that if I hadn't gone with the synagogue. So it's being willing to try some different things. Now, here's the interesting part. Teaching children in the Presbyterian Church. It's going to come out. My background has to come out. And recently, we're doing a Kay Arthur inductive Bible study with 4th, 5th graders. So she goes into every word. We're in the book of John, I think we started in the 11th chapter. Well, she focuses in on the feast. So I drew them the menorah and I showed each feast. Well, 2 weeks ago, we had a new girl in, and I'm drawing the menorah and I'm asking the kids, okay, tell me what the feasts are. And they said one, Passover. They couldn't remember a lot of them. And then she goes, Christmas. I said, no, honey, Christmas isn't on here. What do you mean Christmas isn't on there? I said, well, it's not really in the Bible. Now, just a word like that can rock this little girl. I think she's a genius. I really do. It can rock her world. And the other thing was the Sabbath. We got to talking about that. And I said, it's on Saturday. She goes, no, it's not. It's on Sunday. I said, well, let's look at a calendar. And we looked at that and I could just see, just like us, when we started learning the truth, it's pretty monumental. It's life-changing. But I've had wonderful opportunities to teach the children. And I think that's what we're doing, Al. I think we are the forerunners. And we may only be able to drop a hint here and there. Oh, I can't be here this week. I'm going to Sukkot. What's Sukkot? And you'll be surprised. I'm surprised at how many people I find that do know something about these things and they're interested.
Yes, they are. That's certainly been my experience. And another thing where you and I have a point of connection is with fostering the family, the ministry in South Carolina. Here we are, Torah keepers, Sabbath honorers, and we're working with Sunday Christians. And what I have found, first of all, this is an absolutely necessary work that God is doing to care for the foster children in South Carolina and to get the church to come around the families that care for them, foster and adoptive families. Okay, we're involved because that is a work that our Messiah is doing. They call him Jesus, we call him Yeshua, but our heart for this ministry is the same. And what I've also found is that, similar to what you said, if we have something going on a Shabbat or on a feast day, well, they know Sukkot is happening in the fall, and I'm not going to be available all the time for things, but it's to the point that we can work it out. We understand where each other is coming from. We also understand we're on the same team. We're in the same family. We adore the same and follow the same Savior. And at this point, it's just a difference in how we walk that out in certain cases. But when it gets to the heart of the matter, the important things of what is on God's heart, the church is still doing it. And what you've said, I mean, teaching these children and these wonderful children in these churches with the grief share, with the ministry with the Hispanic families and their children. Hey, the church is still doing it. And who are we to say that that's wrong because it's being done on the wrong day? Now, I think the salt and light and becoming, reconnecting with our family and walking together on those points of agreement that we have, that's the way we insert ourselves and are able to share the things God has given us. But we have to be in relationship first. And what we've
We
done,
do.
yeah.
And that takes time, it takes patience, but you just hit it, salt and light. So when I'm on the board for the ministry, I can pick up on things. And that's probably why they put me on there, because they know I'm passionate about our Savior. And when I see things going off the main road, getting sidetracked, I can bring them back in. Well, that's an important place. And I don't think we should back off from the church as government. I mean, I ran for a school board position and got it. I think we should be involved in that. Wherever the Lord leads us, we shouldn't have those fences that say, oh, you can't go there. Well, who says? Who's making the rules, We've got to be spirit-led.
That we do. Let's talk about the synagogue now for a little bit. You have had experience both in Messianic and non-Messianic settings. And let's see, the non-Messianic synagogue that you were involved with, I don't believe was Orthodox. Was it conservative?
No, they're really in this area, there are not any conservative. Well, there's Chabad or there's Orthodox, but there's also Reform. And I found that the Reform was more open, and they're very open, believe me.
Yeah.
But so I was working in high school with a lovely Jewish woman, and she was Messianic, but she was the French teacher. So we teamed up with the English, the French, and the library, and we all worked together and had like a mini Holocaust museum. So I asked someone from the synagogue, Manfred Kotz, to come and talk to our children about the Holocaust. So he did that 2 consecutive years. And then he went to my mother's independent living and he talked about it there. So I offered him an opening, and then getting to know him, I wanted to go to the synagogue and learn more, which I did, and joined the women's group there. Really enjoyed that, book studies. And it was all going well until about COVID happened. And then somehow things changed. The Reform synagogues closest to me became ultra liberal, so much that I wasn't comfortable there anymore. But I had lunch today with the president of the synagogue, and she's very comfortable with me. She actually came to my mom's funeral, and some of the ladies from the synagogue came to my husband's funeral. So there was some good relationships formed there.
And of course, we have our friends in Israel, all of whom are Orthodox, good relationships there. All right, what's the Lord doing here? Why is he positioned people like us in between Sunday church and various expressions of Judaism? Because I think we would feel relatively comfortable in a number of settings, whether it's Reform or Orthodox or Chabad, based on what we know and the people we know and have interacted with. What do you think the Lord is doing, if you could put it in a big picture term?
I think he's preparing the church and the Jews for Jerusalem, for the Messianic kingdom. I study with Halissa Alewine, and she's always teaching us we're on that front line because there's going to be a lot of questions when this comes about. And she doesn't teach us necessarily that it's going to be like, boom, we're raptured, go to heaven, it's all new. No, we're people. We're going to step into this kingdom, whether it's in this body or another body, and we're going to have to teach. And we may be teaching a lot of these people that we're with right now. So that's all by faith. But I think it's exciting. And I think when we have that hope, we're not going to feel like, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. I'm just out here. No place. But no, we're on the front line for such a time as this. And, I'm 75. I was born in 49. And for, a little while, like right now, Israel's 75 years old. So for a couple months, Israel and I are the same age. And I really grew up with Israel. In 67, I became aware during the 6-Day War, I had a lot of Jewish friends at my college, that there was such a place as Israel, and that they would actually weep over an article in the newspaper. I never saw that before. This was all brand new. So it was at that point I started to say, maybe that's an important place. And I've grown up ever since. So it is our family. Judah and Ephraim do belong together.
We do. And what I'm finding, and I think you also are finding, is that our family is much, much bigger than we ever thought.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, now what are I'm sure the listeners can have this in their own minds, but in your experience, what are the points of friction, both with our traditional Christian brethren and with our Jewish brethren, first Messianic and second non-Messianic? What are the points that cause issues?
Well, when I was going to the synagogue, I remember one day a couple of ladies cornered me and they go, "What are you? What are you doing here?" And I just said, "Well, you know what? I'd rather not be put in a box. I'm just here to learn." So the point of contention would be, I'm here to cause a disruption. I'm here to change you all. That can be a problem. And I think in the church, being proud can be a bone of attention of contention. Even in my Sunday school at the Baptist church, I went to that Sunday school because my daughter's church is all young people. Well, hello, they don't want to hang out with me. I needed some older people with some activities. So just talking every week, I find that they're very interested. And you know what it's all about? It's all about Israel. We are going to find that people are going to be attracted to us because they have a heart for Israel and they want to know what's going to happen. The president of the synagogue today said, "What do you think about October 7th? And just watched my reaction to see what it meant to me. Of course, I'm devastated, but also to be able to talk about the anti-Semitism that they're feeling right now. For example, this woman, she was invited by a middle school in a country town, a few counties over, to talk to the 7th graders about the Holocaust. So she's talking about the Holocaust, and this one child gets up and goes, "Well, you know about Syria, and you know about Jordan, right?" She goes, "Yes." And then he goes, "Well, you know about the Palestinians and that the Jews are committing genocide." And she was devastated. And she said, that's enough, I'm leaving. And the teachers are like, no, no, no. But all the kids started clapping because he brought this up. Now, this is a little town out in the middle of nowhere, but that anti-Semitism is spreading like a cancer. So I've always felt we need to have relationships with Jews in this United States because I knew it would happen again. And it's happening.
Yeah, it is. Even in my interaction with, people on our side of the family, the Christian side, it's amazing what people do not know. And the source of their news, well, they never even really thought about who's putting out that which they are consuming. So what this middle school student said in the middle of nowhere in the North Carolina, it is shocking, but it's more common than we think. So that makes sense why the Lord has positioned this strange part of his body, us Torah-keeping Christians, Hebraic Christians, however you want to call us, to know both sides of the story, both sides of the family, and be able to talk the language that each can understand. So what's the most important thing that we have to deal with right now? You just touched on one. the attitudes of our young people and the knowledge or lack of knowledge of our young people. And let me just ask this, is that the most important issue we have right now in the spring of 2024 as Israel is waging a war for its own existence and God is doing things to change this world in ways we have never seen?
I think so. And I think we have to adjust ourselves. And you know this because you've dealt with the younger generation to how can we talk to them about this very issue? Because they're hearing all the terrible things, and we know it's the media. We know it's AI that's doing it. In fact, I heard today that if you put something out there on X, you get an immediate response with charts and why you're wrong. And the person talking about it said, "Oh, that's all predetermined. They're looking for a word, and then they're going to crush you." Which, if you study the 30s in Germany, that's the tactic. It's all about propaganda. So how can we overcome the propaganda that's being pushed? And in my own family, there's a division. I see it in the church. I see it in the Messianic congregation. We have to have some good answers, and they have to be quick because they're not going to sit around and listen to a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I know that's my problem as I'm the historical guy. So I will be glad to give you a 30-minute or 90-minute lecture on how what's happening to the Jews today is what has been happening to the Jews since the time of Moses in Egypt. But that's not what they need. They need the sound bites, and they need those sound bites that are rooted in the understanding of that 90-minute lecture of where this has all happened before. So how do we get there?
Well, Al, you and I have discussed this. You asked somebody who knew a lot about the Bible, who does the land of Judea and Samaria belong to? And their response was, I don't know.
Yeah.
So how do we respond to that? So good questions, I think, and some very quick kind of answers that'll get them to think.
That's it. We got to where we are because God used different methods to cause us to think and ask questions and look into the scriptures for ourselves. But yeah, and we have in our Sabbath keeping congregations people who have come into this walk because they're seeing that the church, while not actually wrong on many things, missed this part. So they're studying for themselves. They had the questions and they're digging it out for themselves. So they come to this Sabbath keeping congregation. But they still might not understand about Israel, about the Jewish people being the heart and soul of Israel, the physical remnant of Abraham's seed, to which we are grafted in, not the other way around. The traditional Christian church, well, I can think of my brother's pastor, for example, a wonderful man of God, who recently wrote a pamphlet about Israel in which he put so many of his questions in there and was trying to be very honest and walk a fine line between full support of the Jewish state regardless and, wait a minute, I'm not sure that the Jews are supposed to be there. Now, this man, and by the way, this Baptist pastor, is one who has purposefully cultivated relationships with the Jewish community in his city. But I would say right now, he's the exception. Because traditional Sunday Christians, well, Israel is still a concept out there, like it was to you before 1967 when you're at college and encountering Jewish friends who are weeping over headlines in the newspaper. And I think I just answered my question, Bev, so thank you. How do we get those soundbite answers? Well, by sharing our experience. And you've got a wealth of experience in Israel, here in the States, with Jewish people of so many different backgrounds. So this may be a hard question to answer, but in the last couple of years especially, what results, what progress have you seen in this process of just being there, answering questions, and helping people to think through the issues?
It's incremental, slow.
Mm.
But I realize if I go any faster, then they're ready. But every once in a while, I have to throw a wrench in the monkey works. I'll give you an example. So my son-in-law is an elder in the church where I teach the children. And so he said, people often ask me because I'm new, like, what's it like? What are some of the problems that you're facing? And he said, well, mostly it's not theological, although they asked me a lot of questions about that. He said it's like somebody got upset with somebody and you have to put out fires. I said, so it would be the only time theological come up is when you have a teacher and maybe they're not teaching what is in your doctrine. He goes, exactly. So I said, well, maybe your mother-in-law will be in front of your board one day. And he goes, what? And so I related about the questions the children had about Christmas and the holidays and the Sabbath being the seventh day. Well, my daughter came up right away and said, well, how do they know it's the Sabbath? It could be any day. The Sabbath could have moved around. So that was good. I said, look into that. I said, do some research because I've done it and I think they're pretty right on. Well, what did I do the next moment? I ran in to make sure what I'm talking about because it is complicated. When you look at the two calendars, how they're matching up this year, not at all. And that there are minutes off. And over the decades, these minutes add up over the centuries, really. But I thought the best answer was Chabad saying, listen, for 40 years, we knew when the Sabbath was. And he said, we never stopped celebrating. Maybe one person or another might forget, but not the collective whole. They are going to know the Sabbath. So I think it's things like that we need to be able to say, let's look at it. Let's investigate it together. And let's talk about it. But it's very hard when someone's been so indoctrinated.
Right. The heart has to be right. And the only way that we're going to know that is if we have a relationship. And
yes.
I certainly agree with you. It's got to be incremental. You cannot take someone to a place they're not willing to go yet. But, I had a conversation just recently in this past week where a friend was asking me, why is it that Easter and Passover are a month apart this year, but they were right together last year? And praise God, I'd been in this long enough and studied the calendar issues that I could give her an answer that she was ready for and appreciated. But that required relationship. And if we can get to that point on a relatively innocuous question of why is it Easter and Passover are a month apart, then we can get to those more difficult questions. With our Jewish friends, well, why do you believe that Jesus is the Messiah? With our Christian friends, well, why is it you don't celebrate Christmas the way we do? We have to get to the point where we are so secure in our identity that we do not feel threatened by their questions.
Exactly. That's right, because we're the older generation and they're the younger generation. And I was there and we thought we knew it all. And we don't want an older generation coming and telling us what they believe. Okay, so what do? We respect and we serve. I submit to these younger people and I'll do it your way. It's okay. I don't have to push myself on anything. I might have an idea here and there, but I just want to help you out. I just want to love you. And that takes a couple of years. It's taken me a couple of years with FIT and with the synagogue several years. But they need to know Christians love them. And if by any opportunity I can go back to Israel and serve in some way to help out, I want to do that.
Well, the need is certainly there. You've mentioned in previous conversations about grief share and how you see that could be of benefit in an Israel that right now is suffering national trauma again. We do have a lot that we can share. But one thing is we have to get to the point that we're willing to share it and contribute what we have without judgment and without expectations, but just out of that humble love.
Yep. Because I think when we have that extravagant love towards others, they're going to see who our God is. It's not about arguments. It's about serving and loving Him and serving them. That's
yes,
the key.
It certainly is. I'm thinking of Paul's estatement that he becomes all things to all people, if by any means he might save some, which how do we interpret that with the experience I've had and what we're talking about now? You're doing it. you're being someone that a Sunday Christian can relate to. You're being someone that a Messianic believer who worships on Shabbat can relate to. You're being someone that a Jewish person can relate to. You're being all things to all people. Let's see, how do we interpret that part so that you can save some? Well, in the Christian context, I think that is interpreted as bring them to Jesus. Okay, I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I would say there's more to it, such as get to the point where you can actually touch a need and help and save in a certain situation, like where there's trauma, like where there's suffering, that where there is an abandoned child who needs a home. How are they going to let us in if they don't trust us?
Right. And the Lord will show you places where you can meet one of their needs and do something for them. Taking them out to lunch, finding out if they have a difficulty at home, ministering to a Jewish woman who's a widow, things like that. But the key is you got to get out there. You've got to get out of your comfort zone. And of course, being a widow thrown out into the unknown, I just realized I have to forge ahead. There's nowhere to retreat to. There's no little comfy covers to pull over my head. It's now or never.
It certainly is. Now, Bev, as we're winding up our time together, I just want to recap a couple of things that you have shared with us. You're a widow. You're in your mid-70s. You're still going. You still have something to contribute, and you want to make sure that you do this. that in itself is a testimony to people who need to hear. You're not giving up on life, and you are finding ways for the outlets that the Lord is putting right in front of you. So let me ask if you have any final words to impart. What's the greatest thing that you would like our hearers to take away from our conversation?
Well, let me just tell you about an upcoming opportunity. Our last girls club, 4th, 5th grade, is meeting on the 23rd, which is Tuesday, which sun will not be down, so it'll be Passover. So I said to the leader over all the children, hey, what it would be like if we had Passover on our front porch, had these kids over. And she was excited. She said, yes, I've done Passover with my children. Let's do that. So I've been preparing the kids for months. I said, look at the moon. We can tell when Passover is coming by the moon. And, I'm getting them used to the moon is our clock. God put it in the sun and the moon and the stars up there to show us when the Moedim are. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be exciting.
Oh, yes. And as we're recording now, in the first part of April, you got 3 weeks, but what an exciting thing. Seems to me the opportunities are there. It's just up to us to discern them. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Lord said, if there's the pearls or the diamonds or whatever, the treasures, you need to go out there and dig. They're not just going to pop up for you. You got to go searching for them and then wait. Be a good fisherman.
Amen. Wait, that's another key point. Well, I think we'll have to leave it there, Bev, but this has been a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing of your life's experience and a lot of your hope and your joy that the Lord is giving you, even now, at this stage of life when a lot of people will just turn inward. But you're not. You're still looking out to be a contributing member of his kingdom. So on behalf of all us younger people, thank you. Thank you for giving us that example.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks for letting me talk.